Hello, Player One. Welcome to the Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, I'm JP, and today we are exploring the most unexpectedly romantic genre and also quite possibly the most scandalous genre of video games, MMORPGs. So, Gabby, MMORPGs, or as I like to call them, MMORPGs.
MMORPGs. Okay.
Have you had any personal experience playing MMORPGs?
Not super much. I mean, I used to dabble on Ragnarok Online for only a little bit though, but not really spending countless nights on them, really.
Okay, no countless nights playing MMORPGs. Okay, that's fine. I also haven't really played MMORPGs since I was like a lot younger, but there was a time in my youth, like in my late teens, I spent a lot of time, especially on the free MMORPGs, because, money's tight back in the day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I played some, mostly not, I didn't play any of the big ones. I think the biggest one I played was Anarchy Online.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously I'm a bit more into sci-fi than fantasy, as you know.
That's true. Did you play for long or not really?
No, I don't think so. No. There was one I played, which was a South Korean MMORPG, which also caught my eye, which was called Run Online, like RAN, Run Online.
Yeah.
And in this one, you're actually like a school boy or girl, college age, not like, school. And you join one of 3 different schools, and you can either be like a martial arts fighter, or like a sword fighter, or like a healer. And it's kind of set in like modern-ish day, time. And just go around and, bullying over school children, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, being a healer at school.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many MMORPGs, right? Like so many. And like not all of them are World of Warcraft level big.
That's true.
For every World of Warcraft, there's like 200 small MMORPGs probably no one's ever heard of us outside from yourself, Player One, yeah? So
yeah, it could be. And you know what, though? You said before, like, it is the unexpectedly most romantic genre of video games.
yes.
And I keep hearing all of these stories about how people met in MMORPGs and become real couple and stuff, which is quite nice, but sadly we won't actually be talking about that today, will we?
No, because we realized today is going to be so heavily loaded already with content that, it's going to be hard to actually get into every single cool thing about MMORPGs. Like, there's so many like scandals I actually wanted to bring up as well, controversies in games. There's a lot of things that happen in EVE Online, which I just won't have time to really get into this time. But yeah, I mean, you can always let us know if you want a follow-up episode on MMORPGs, if you like Player One. But just to let you know what we'll actually be talking about today. Today we'll be focusing on what led up to the birth of MMORPGs. So the ancestor games, if you will, that helped build the genre in the first place. How did we get here, basically? That's what we'll be focusing on today.
Yeah, that's true. So let's get into it then. Let's talk about definitions. So MMORPGs, or as JP said he would like to call it, MMORPGs, are games that are MMO and RPGs.
Nice, yeah. This is why nobody pays us to do this podcast, you know.
And that's it. We're not going to expand more. No. Okay, so they're basically massive multiplayer online that are RPG games. RPG in a classic computer RPG sense, like if you imagine Skyrim, Fallout, we really mean, like straightforward, good old Dungeons and Dragons inspired role-playing games.
Right.
Like, create a character, you complete quests, and you gain experience points. You can level up your skills. You know the drill. Why did I even list it? I feel like Player Ones would know this.
Yeah, we're talking Skyrim, Fallout, straightforward RPGs, right?
Yeah, so that's the RPG side of it. But pinning down what exactly makes an MMO, that's actually a little trickier. How how massive, how multiplayer, and how online it needs to be.
Yeah, that's right. So if you break it down, there's, I think, two really main components to what makes an MMO game. So first we have that there is a persistent online world. So this means that the game world is always there, it's always active, it's always online, and it's evolving. And it doesn't really matter whether you as a player inside of the game right now, or if there's 10,000 people playing the game, or nobody at all, right? When you leave the game, you're just leaving the world, but the world is actually still happening in the background. It's still always there, so it's persistent, and that's really what makes an MMO an MMO. That's number one. But the second thing is also the number of people that are inhabiting the game world. That is where the massive word actually comes from. It's not because it's a big open world, like geography big. No, it's because of the sheer amount of people playing the game. But you might be wondering, so how many people do you need to call it a massive multiplayer game rather than just a multiplayer game? Well, that's not really something that's defined very well, and we won't be getting into that, but just know this, that for World of Warcraft, for example, there's probably 200,000 people playing at the very same time right now, this very minute. So to summarize, MMORPGs are games with persistent, always online worlds, shared and played by a lot of people, but we don't know exactly how much makes a lot.
Yes, that's true. But what makes it tricky to define though? Because there are so many games now that are online and played by a lot of people as well, but they aren't really classed as MMOs.
Yeah, because in general, I don't think anyone really talks about MMOs anymore, right? I mean, in 2026, I think the term is kind of outdated almost. It feels like it anyway. Most popular online games now, they created their own kind of little mini genres. They defined their own style of multiplayer online. So if we think about some popular games right now, Minecraft. So people will probably call that like a sandbox game. And Fortnite and PUBG, they are PvP battle royale games. And League of Legends is a battle arena game. So the popularity of MMOs is kind of like gone really downhill back from its golden heyday. So things are more about like the more focused, packaged multiplayer experiences now, where you might have 5 versus 5 or 10 versus 10 or 100 versus everybody, rather than that old MMO formula. That doesn't seem to be so popular anymore.
Yeah, MMOs put everyone in the same world, right? But perhaps on a small number of different servers to accommodate technical limitations and time zones. If
Right.
you imagine like World of Warcraft having 200,000 players, they're not literally like walking at the same space, small area
No,
in one time.
not literally. No, that's true. But that is still the general idea behind an MMO, that you could do it in theory, but not literally in the exact same house. Like you couldn't fit 200,000
No.
World of Warcraft players in the same house. No.
Exactly.
But across the entire shared world, yes.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, the only real genre that carry the torch from that classic MMO days are specifically MMORPGs. This can get confusing with all of
Yeah.
the terms and acronyms, by the way.
I agree.
But yes, basically, if you delve deeper into like all of the type of MMO games, the RPG side of things are the one that's still alive.
Holding strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
They still got a strong fan base. Easiest way to describe it is probably by admitting that when I was younger, I used to assume that when people say MMOs, they're just too lazy to say MMORPGs. But that's actually not the case. There's many different types of MMOs. So let's just briefly describe some of the other ones. So, for example, We have MMORPGs, so that's massive multiplayer online first-person shooters. So there's one MMORPGs, for example, PlanetSide 2, where on January the 23rd, 2015, 1,158 players were all playing inside of the same match, and for the time they were setting a Guinness World Record for most players online playing in a single FPS battle. So all of these over 1,000 players, they were representing one of the three in-game factions, the Terran Republic, the New Conglomerate, and the Vanu Sovereignty. And so this is also a good example to where it's a difference between multiplayer online and MMOs, right? So Counter-Strike, that's like maybe, 10 versus 10 or 16 versus 16 matches on many different servers. But PlanetSide 2, that was an MMORPG. So you had so many people playing inside of this one match, right? Imagine playing Call of Duty, right, where you got 3 teams in like the same map, and there's like 1,000 plus
1,000.
people playing. Yeah, exactly. Crazy, right?
Yeah, if you think Unreal Tournament is already chaos, I don't know how to explain this one.
Yeah.
There are also other MMOs like racing MMOs, like Trackmania. There are also simulation-based MMOs like World of Tanks, and also MMORTS, MMO real-time strategy. But like we say, these have all become quite less popular over the last couple of decades in favor of games like Fortnite, for example, with the exception of MMORPGs somehow, which continue to have a sizable active player base up to this day.
So you might be wondering, Gabby, why did it all start then, right?
Okay, yeah.
So let me take you back to Athens, Greece. It's a beautiful summer day in 432 before Christ.
My God, they have computer back then?
No, but our philosopher king Plato is born.
Oh my God, this again. Okay. Why are we always coming back to this?
Because Plato is the source of everything.
But Plato the computer actually has nothing to do with MMORPGs though.
Yeah, kind of. Come on.
Okay, we have to explain this a little bit, right? So Plato is also the name of the US mainframe computer system that's built in 1960 at the University of Illinois. That was kind of like a home computer and internet system, but built for use by researchers and students at universities on a local network. So they're connected, but way before internet.
Yes, before we landed on the moon, actually.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah. So before we had computers and the internet at home, students were already chatting with each other. They also play games, posting in forums, and screen sharing with each other as early as the 1960s. And with Plato, the mainframe, the first RPGs and the first multiplayer games were born. So not MMORPGs, but separately, respectively, the first RPG and the first multiplayer games were born.
That's right.
Yeah. But to be fair, though, because Plato was kind of an isolated system and it is inaccessible to the wider public, and because we don't want to start most of our episode with like, oh, let's start from Plato, because it's a little bit like that so far. I think we should go straight to talking about MUDs instead.
Yeah, let's talk about MUD. So MUD isn't just wet dirt. They're also multi-user dungeon games, which is also the name of the first multi-user dungeon game. So,
okay.
Yeah, so there is a game called multi-user dungeon,
Okay.
but there's also a genre called multi-user dungeon.
Yeah, so is it MUD for the game and MUDs with an S?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah,
okay.
So MUD for the game and MUDs for the genre. That sounds cool. Yeah, so MUD was created by Roy Trubshaw and Richard Bartle at the University of Essex in England in 1978, using the university's PDP-10 mainframe computer, that good old PDP-10 that we've mentioned a few times before now.
Yeah, that's very small, right? Yeah.
Absolutely huge. Yeah. Massive, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Yes. So, what inspired Roy to create Mud was the text adventure game Zorg, which was also an English single player text based adventure game that you can hear much more about on a past episode of Gaming History Club, the one called What If? History of Interactive Fiction. For now, all you need to know was that Zorg was all about typing commands like go north or pick up gold, and the computer narrates to you by text what the outcome of your actions are and how the game story unfolds. So, Roy wanted to create a multiplayer version of Zorg, and this is actually why Roy and Richard would call the game multi user Dungeon, because Dungeon is a reference to the Zorg games, which you'll notice if you listen to the past episode. But just to really catch you guys up really quickly, there was a game called Dungeon, which is a text-based adventure game, and when the developers wanted to bring it into people's home computers to play, there was a bit of a memory issue. So they had to split the game Dungeon into 3 parts, and they called those parts Zorg 1, Zorg 2, and Zorg 3. But this is why Roy called his game multi-user Dungeon. It's literally just a game of Dungeon played multiplayer.
Yeah, and player, you might be thinking now, Mud sounds really different than the concept of like MMORPGs.
Yeah, multiplayer text adventure games.
Yeah, because Muds were text-based, like fully text-based, and there was definitely not thousands of players in the same virtual world. But if we consider that we have a group of players, each of them being in front of a computer terminal, role-playing a computer game together, then yeah, this is kind of where it started for MMORPGs in a very general sense.
Yeah, in a very general sense, because instead of everyone having their own standalone computers at home, the game was played on one mainframe computer, which you can think of like a big server, right? And this mainframe was connecting terminals, and these terminals were just monitors and keyboards, but the actual computer wasn't there inside of those monitors and keyboards. Obviously, they were all connected to the same big computer, the server. So it wasn't online in a classic sense. You can think of it much more like a really big LAN party at a university, right? But this all changed in 1980 when the University of Essex connected its internal network to the ARPANET. And through the ARPANET, it connected to many other universities and research laboratories worldwide. So you can think of this almost like a private internet. So no access for the public, but for universities and research laboratories only. These were connected together now. And with that, Mud became the very first online multiplayer RPG game ever, because you could play it with people not just from the same university via the same mainframe computer, but you could possibly be playing with people from other universities from different countries.
So just to reiterate that, MUDs, the genre, were completely without graphics, so all of them are just purely text-based. Although later they would get some ASCII graphics, meaning those quasi-graphics made out of letters as well, so combining dashes, underscore, and making some shape of brick wall out of it, or something like that. Just, it's lightweight, right, if you just use purely text. Notably, there was a mud game, basically, called Island of Kesmai from 1985, which may be the first one to have used ASCII graphics. And just like in text adventure games, in Mud, players also type commands like go north, or attack goblin, or eat the cake, drink the pina colada, anything you can think of.
I don't think they had drink the pina colada.
I mean, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pick up gold, loot goblin. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's more like it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, players could meet, talk, trade, team up, or attack each other, much like in modern-day graphic MMORPGs, or MMORPGs, as I like to call them. But with mods, you're fighting, stealing, looting, and exploring dungeons all through the text narration. So mods, yeah, if you didn't catch on by now, really were the forerunner to MMORPGs. And they themselves, mods, became actually really, really popular in the 80s as well, despite the lack of a real internet and graphics, which, if you stop to think about it, that's a complete contradiction, isn't it? Like, how do you have like MMORPGs before the internet and before graphics? But there was a thing, and it was mods.
Yeah, that's true. Invention didn't only start from internet, you know.
Crazy, right? Crazy.
I know.
There is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, and apparently mods were sometimes known as multi-undergraduate destroyer due to their tendency to preoccupy students. And sometimes parents would actually complain to universities that their children are staying up all night playing video games instead of studying.
Naughty, naughty.
I know, right? So sometimes the people who were creating these games on the university mainframe computers would actually take the game down during late night and early morning hours just to make sure people weren't just too fixated on playing games rather than studying.
Right, yeah. Mods were actually super, super popular, and they would only start to see a gradual decrease in popularity since around the late 2000s, which is actually really late if you stop to think about it, yeah? The community of these games were very loyal and passionate players. Obviously, so many was also their chosen way to get away from like those pressures of university life, right? So a lot of them, they had multiple characters across many different games, and they were really getting into that role-playing element of the RPG, like fully becoming that, character that they invented. And you know what, Gabby, talking about role-playing, wink, wink. Yes, the whole chatting and flirting with people virtually via text, that was totally a thing that started here with mods too. So you could say they were getting dirty in the mud, if you know what I mean.
Oh my god. Was this like Tinder back in the day or something?
Yes, potentially, but without profile pictures.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you use ASCII graphics?
Ooh, nice, love it. Everyone was getting catfished by the fancy @ symbols back in the day.
Yeah. But anyway, since we're talking about mods, we probably should talk about this really one standout mod game and briefly jump ahead 11 years from 1978, when the first mod was basically born, to 1989 to talk about Avalon: The Legend Lives, which is a mod developed by Yehuda Simmons and released in October 1989.
Yeah, so according to some, this might just be the longest running, still active mod being played to this very day. And it brought so many features, elements, advancements to mods, and in a way, therefore, also to MMORPGs. It honestly makes your head spin. So Avalon was like super ambitious, right? Their mission statement was to be the very first fully developed role-playing world to create a life within a life, using real-world systems that fully immerse the players into the lives of their characters. And it did all this fully without graphics.
Yeah, so when you create a character, the player would choose one of the 3 cities, which all had their own unique traits, guilds, and that would change the specifics of your chosen profession, such as mage, knight, bard, but also many others. And when I say many others, they are actually quite complex in this. The game introduced many complex skills and abilities like writing, perception, thievery, and since 2015, there were more than 60 skills and more than 2,000 abilities that players could gain in the game. And yeah, this is such a big leap forward from the simple distribution skill points from previous mods that exist.
Yeah, but honestly, this rabbit hole goes so deep for this game. So, there's real politics in the game. So there's like organizations that are run by the players themselves, right? So we're talking like governments and ministers. There's like a fully fleshed out economic system. And also in terms of like the warfare, so you've got like legions, battalions, trenches, minefields, barricades, and fortifications. So you have to think of it this way, like fighting, other players in Avalon, this has real implications to like your reputation, your power, and your territory in the game.
Yeah, and remember, this is all text-based,
Right.
so complex and so intricate without graphic. How?
Avalon, so it really makes the world feel like an actual real world, considering it's text only. So whatever the players decide to do, with each other and the politics and the economics in the game, like it feels like it is actually changing this world organically, right? It's honestly, it's really, really cool and super immersive by the sounds of it.
Okay, so now we've talked about mods, and I think we should move on because it's really easy to get lost here. Because mods could easily have their own dedicated episode as well, and we keep saying this about every single thing we talk about in the
Yeah, I
episode.
know. This reminds me of the point and click episode where I just wanted to do like an episode about point and click adventure games, but then turns out, oh, I got to talk about text adventure games, and then about like adventure games, and then point and click adventure games.
There are so many things that we could talk about, and we will get to it eventually, right? But yes, mods did have RPG elements, and really strong too, actually. Complex numerous systems sometimes. So many it could make your head spin just to think about it. Without graphics. So, yeah, definitely very impressive. But now let's talk about the first MMORPG ancestor that has graphics, which is a game called Habitat developed by LucasArts that was released in 1986 for the Commodore 64. So that's 3 years before Avalon, actually.
So Habitat was not really an MMORPG. It was more like a virtual online community. So you can think of it of having more things in common to games like Second Life or The Sims Online. Since there was not really any plot or side quests, there's no leveling up. So, you're actually just, walking, hanging around, chatting with people. But you could actually do some gameplay stuff, like you could steal from people and you could actually kill them as well. So it was super impressive for its time, don't get me wrong, but it's very, very flat, right? So these are early 2D Commodore 64 graphics, and this really makes you understand why people weren't trying to make online RPGs just yet. I mean, the Commodore 64, it had a resolution of 320 by 200, and there was a total of 16 colors. So basically everything looks like it was made in Microsoft Paint on MS-DOS on like a really low resolution.
Yeah, I mean, still though, it did have graphics, so,
It did have graphics.
Yeah.
That's true.
The gameplay itself was quite dynamic though, actually, even though there were no real objectives, quests, or storyline, players could still rob and kill each other. This will ensure like drama, excitement, and politics within the game. During the early days of the game, this caused quite a lot of chaos because people would just do whatever they want to do.
Of course.
But as with most things, slowly over time, players created their own rules and they could choose to follow it or not. The game featured a house for everyone. You could wander into cities, towns, and many public spaces like shops, forests, and wild areas, basically. You could create your own character with different color and pattern clothes, so you could still look cute. That's not a limitation.
No, it's a necessity actually looking cute online.
That's true. It also has some reasonable amount of customization, considering the limited hardware of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You had objects in the game and they could be manipulated and moved around. And the game in general, it was kept quite broadly open for interpretation, if you want to call it that, in the sense of, so the two developers, Chip Morningstar and Randy Farmer, they consciously decided not to dictate to the players themselves too much what they should be doing in the game. They decided to let the players decide for themselves how to play the game and have fun. It was kind of like a experimental kind of game, actually, in many ways. So, speaking of all that chaos you mentioned, Gabby, players would take objects out of other people's hands and just, take them. And they would go inside of other people's homes and just shoot them right there for no reason and take all their money. It was crazy. It was the Wild West.
I guess that's the reason, no? To take all of the money.
Right, yeah, that would be a good reason. Yeah.
Yeah, there was also like one player that was a Greek Orthodox minister that created his own and the very first church within the game. And every time he logged out from the game, other players would steal all of his flowers that he kept inside the church. And then they would sell them for easy money. So that's a bit sad.
Oh my God. This is what happens when you let people be anonymous online. They do all kinds of naughty things. You can't trust anybody on the internet.
That's true.
Yeah. There was also someone that created a newspaper inside of the game. So, you know what? He would actually spend 10, 20 hours every week and sometimes create this full-on tabloid of 50 pages of this in-game newspaper of things of events happening or rumors and news in the game. Crazy.
So how big was this game? How many people were playing Habitat? Well, an estimated of 15,000 people played Habitat during its initial short-lived 2-year run. So that's the total number of players, not the number of players that played every time, basically. Right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So the total number of players, which was very impressive for 1986, because that's way before everybody had a computer and before the internet as we know it. They're not connected to it using nowadays internet.
No, they used a quantum link.
Yeah, so the Commodore 64 would be connected via modem or telephone line, basically.
Quantum computing, I believe.
You wish. But not really. But it would be connected to quantum link, which is kind of like a mainframe. So that's how it works. That's how they are connected to this internet.
And also, Chip Morningstar and Randy Farmer, they were awarded with the Pioneer Award by the International Game Developers Association for their work on Habitat. So for all of the cool things Habitat was, it was not really an MMORPG though, because there was just a complete lack of those traditional RPG elements that we talked about. Because honestly, it sounds more like a 2D GTA Online than it does a World of Warcraft, right? But the game that's usually credited with being the first graphical online RPG, now that is Neverwinter Nights from 1991, not to be confused with Neverwinter Nights from 2002. So Neverwinter Nights was released in March of 91 on MS-DOS, and it was developed by Beyond Software.
Yeah, the funny thing is, this one also isn't an MMORPG technically.
That's right, no.
Yeah, but it and other games like it took steps in that MMORPG territory with the hardware limitations of the time.
Which were plentiful.
Yes.
It's 1991.
So, okay, let's put this into context. When the game released, it only allowed 50 players to play on the same server, but it was later increased to 500 over its 6-year lifespan. So why we're saying it's technically not really MMORPG, because it still had that limitation on how massive it could be. But
especially at the start with 50, I don't think you can call that massive just yet.
It might be quite small compared to you see World of Warcraft, 200,000. What's 50, right? Compared to that. But again, this is way before. But I guess the point is, if they could make it that massive, they would have. Yeah, exactly. But during its peak in the mid-90s, it actually had a remarkable amount of players. They had 115,000 players in total. And probably it could have been many more players if it wasn't for that $6 per hour fee you had to pay to play the game.
Outrageous. $6 per hour.
Oh my God, I wouldn't even pay that to play games now.
And this before inflation.
Yeah, this is the real price at that time, basically, in the mid-90s. Well, actually, early 90s. Yeah.
I struggle paying $6 for a full AAA game these days, to be honest with you. I'm really stingy with games. Anyway.
Yeah, so Neverwinter Nights actually improved on the MUD formula by adding graphics, and games like this were literally called graphical MUDs because finally you can see things properly.
Well, that's oversimplifying it a bit, Gabby.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, so the gameplay narrative still takes place through reading text and typing in commands, but Neverwinter Nights also had some basic graphical representation of what's going on too. But it basically still had that classic text thing going on at the same time, still alongside it.
Yeah.
So with very simple 2D sprites, it was representing characters and the basic look of whatever environment you were in, like a dungeon, for example, or whatever. So how did it kind of look? Well, it looks like an MS-DOS game. It had very low resolution. It had a small color palette. It was definitely not as nice looking as the console games that were out at the same time. So, we were playing things like Super Mario World and Zelda: Link to the Past, right? So SNES games. But then Neverwinter Nights, it had kind of like NES style graphics, if that makes sense, right? But Neverwinter Nights was a milestone game, and it had a remarkable player base, especially when you consider that big $6 power price tag. The next game that's really going to shake up the evolution of what is to become MMORPGs was Meridian 59. So sadly it's a game mostly forgotten, even though it is still active to this very day and has become the longest running in MMORPG history. It was created and developed by brothers Andrew and Chris Kermsey, and they were passionate players of those old school mods we talked about before. And they were into one in their youth that was called Scepter of Goth, that was released back in 1983. And that was a mod without graphics that was considered also one of the earliest mods back in the day.
Yeah, so what inspired the brothers, Andrew and Chris, to create Meridian 59 was actually Doom, a first-person shooter that, you know what, we probably don't need to introduce the game, right?
It's Doom.
Everyone knows Doom.
It's Doom.
Just Doom.
It's Doom. Come on.
So what they saw from Doom was the possibility of combining the graphic fidelity of Doom and adding it to a mod like Scepter of Goth that they really like.
Yeah, so their vision became reality when they released Meridian 59, the very first graphic 3D MMORPG ever, to the public on October 7th of 1996.
Yeah, and it has so many firsts under its belt. The first one, it charged a flat fee of $10.95 per month rather than per hour fee. So if you think of it, $10.99 wouldn't even allow you to play Neverwinter Nights for 2 hours. How crazy is that? But you can play Meridian 59 for an entire month. It was also the first to be available on the internet instead of through a service provider like AOL, for example, or Commodore 64's Quantum Link, what we talked about before. Another one, it was the first MMORPG to be featured in magazines and the first to be released by a major publisher, the 3DO company.
The actual game itself was different from the other graphical mods, not only because it was played from the first-person angle and it was in 3D, well, in that old-school 3D sense, like, Doom and Wolfenstein, where, the sprites get, smaller and bigger depending how far away you are. It wasn't like true polygon 3D, right? But anyway, it was also different because you're not just typing in commands anymore to make the entire game work. You're actually moving around like traditionally with your mouse and keyboard now. So, you're still using the keyboard to chat to your other players, but you can now move around with your keyboard and you can look around with your mouse. You weren't saying go north anymore or attack goblin. You were playing with keyboard and mouse the way we're used to now.
Like you click on the goblin to attack it rather than just typing attack goblin.
Exactly.
Yeah. Meridian 59 also features skills, which is quite a given, really, speaking of the type of game. But it also implemented a voting system where leaders could be chosen via an in-game mechanic, so that's quite unique. The way skills and proficiencies work inside the game was also unique, but it would take a long time to explain how every system for each game we spoke about works. So in this case, just a trust me bro kind of moment.
Yeah, trust me bro. Yeah. So one more thing about Meridian 59 then. So one of the original developers, Andrew Kermsey, So, really interesting. He would later work for Google and actually manage the team behind Google Earth, right? And he was a lead in developing Google Now. So, that is that feature that summarizes something in like this little card thing. Rather than bringing up a search result. So, if you're asking for like the weather, like Google will just tell you the weather. It won't show you like a website link to, a weather website. So, yeah, that
Yes.
is Google Now. And that was also supported development by him. And another developer of the game, John Hankey, who joined the Meridian 59 team a little bit later, he is the founder of Niantic, which is the developer behind Pokemon Go. So, yeah, so some really big people were behind this game back in
Yeah.
the day.
Brainy people.
Yes,
Yeah.
brains.
So let's talk to the last game we're going to talk about today. So the last game we'll talk about today might be the most familiar name. No, it's not World of Warcraft, by the way.
Oh, mic drop.
Sorry.
What?
But yeah, especially if you've been more of a casual follower of MMORPGs or only played a small handful of them, or if you haven't been playing computer games since the 80s, basically.
Yeah, it's Ultima Online, released on September 24th, 97, developed by Origin Systems and published by EA. So Ultima is a franchise that's, by the time this game came out, it already had 8 previous mainline single-player games released. So we won't get too deep into the franchise as a whole and the people behind it, like the private astronaut Richard Garriott and the legendary developer Star Long. Let's focus on just Ultima Online for now. So this is the undisputed, cannot be argued by any definition, first big successful blockbuster MMORPG.
Yeah, so Ultima Online had 250,000 subscribers playing at its peak, each paying $9.99 per month to play this game. So they're making almost $2.5 million per month and around 12,500 to 17,000 players playing at the same time. So no doubt this game is big, like massive. Yes. It was in fact Ultima's producer, Richard Garriott, that coined the term MMORPG. So before Ultima, people referred to games like it as mods and graphical mods, as we say before. This is the first official one.
Yeah. So the game had an initial budget of $2.5 million. And because the Ultima games, they were not, like significantly popular before in the mainstream, it was expected that Ultima Online would have maybe around 15,000 subscribers maximum. But the game would be so profitable, they were earning the entire budget of the game back every single month, right? $2.5 million. It's no surprise though, because Ultima completely outdid all the quote-unquote MMORPGs that came before, both in terms of graphics and also the game mechanics. The game at release featured persistent player housing, skill-based character progression, a player-driven economy, and unrestricted player versus player combat.
Yes, but it's not without controversies, though. They also did have some controversies and scandals. One actually happened during the beta testing of the game, so early access players could test the game together with the development team. And Richard Garriott's in-game character was called Lord British. That's not a controversy, though.
No, that's not a controversy.
No.
So the development team was supposed to be invulnerable, right? So this is why many players were super shocked when a player known as Reigns cast a fire field spell and killed Lord British all of a sudden. So Lord British forgot to re-enable his invulnerability setting just after a server crash had happened moments before. And player one, do you know what the response was from the development team? They permanently banned Reigns from the beta test. And they also killed all of the surrounding players that saw what had happened.
Oh, in-game, right?
Oh yeah, in the game.
Yeah,
They
okay.
didn't kill all the players in their homes. Like, hey,
Okay.
you saw this embarrassing thing that happened to me? The admin? Ha! Stab in the back. No.
No.
Yeah, so this was naturally really upsetting to players witnessing the whole thing, and they were actually like, protesting that like Reigns shouldn't be banned for like, killing one of the development team members. Like, what's going on, guys? Calm down.
Yeah,
It's just a game, right?
definitely feels a bit overkill. But that wasn't actually the only scandal, though. Another scandal was when Ultima Online used volunteer players to help train real customer service staff for the game, which is, you know what, for me, that's already weird enough. But once the training was completed, the volunteer program was shut down. And this led to the former volunteers suing Ultima Online, which was eventually settled out of court, actually, but still, it's a bit bizarre.
It is a bit bizarre. And yeah, that is Ultima Online. A little bit bizarre, but also massively successful. And this brings us officially into the realm of actual modern MMORPGs now. So probably a good time to give it a rest for this episode. What do you think, Abby?
Yeah, sure, but Player One, if you're interested for us to explore a bit more about other stuff of MMORPGs,
There's so many things
there's
still.
so many things.
So many things.
Yeah, please do tell us though, because we'll put it on our very long episode list.
Yeah, there's things like, Second Life, for example, right? Virtual community games.
Exactly.
Like The Sims Online and, people, finding their partners online, right? World of Warcraft
yes.
famously, yeah? I feel like that is so common now that it's not even like a big deal anymore. It's just like, how did you meet your partner? Yeah, in World of Warcraft, you're like, oh, okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So, Player One, thank you for listening to the history of MMORPGs or MMORPGs.
MMORPGs, yes. Well, let us know if you want us to explore more in this topic. Write us on our website, gaminghistory.club, and also make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club.
We'll see you next time on the 29th of April. Just don't blink because we'll be super fast and blue like a hedgehog because we'll be talking about the history of Sega. See ya.